Okay, it looks like we're recording. Ready? Last week I didn't hit record till about 10 minutes in, and I was like, oh shoot. So have to make myself notes. But again, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. And as we are reconstructing PACA and getting going, and appreciate a lot of new faces today, which is excellent. And the our stalwarts from the past and our steady individuals that are here, rain or shine, appreciate that too. And so we're continuing on, and Brooks's wife has been logging in at times and just following up with us. So she's feeling good about what's happening, and that's our main focus is to keep things going. And talk to John Hemmer last night, who those of you that know John or know of him, he was part of Brooks's lunch bunch there in Orlando, and they would go to lunch. I don't know if it was weekly or monthly or what, but he said that the PACA dream was something that Brooks started and really wanted to encourage to keep the coaching education going, and that's what I told him and assured him that that's what we were attempting to do, and that we're getting good response with that. So tonight we have an interesting situation because we have a co-coaching group, a married co-coaching group,
That is interesting.
and we want to see, and I've got a few questions, and I'm sure you guys will come up with some. Now, Robert Gary, I know back from the day, we shared Olympic teams together in 96 and '04. Robert went to Ohio State, was a world-class steeplechaser, but he also won a cross-country championship somewhere along the line there too, and was then coaching at Ohio State, and now is at Furman, which I did look up. It's in South Carolina. And so he can share, or he and Rita can share a little bit with that as we go. And the thing I found interesting is that you've had 19 sub 4 minute milers. So I thought that was kind of an interesting statistic as I went back through. Rita, his now wait, Robert is the director now of track and field. Rita is the head coach for women's track and field and cross country. So they have new titles, and we want to make sure we get that right. Now, the interesting thing I found there is that Rita and I guess Robert too have been leading the team, the women's team, right, to 11 conference championships in cross country. So 11 straight, which I think is a national record, or a record that's pretty awesome, I think, um, for 11 straight years to be is Southern Conference. Is that,
Mhm.
see, I did my homework here.
You're doing great.
And but Rita's been at Furman 12 years, and Robert's been there 8, I believe, 7 or
No,
8.
we came at the same time.
Oh, you did?
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Well, you better tell your media guy to get that straight then. So, and now
Lots of
Robert,
people around here want to forget about him.
yeah. But Rita, you started at Miami, is that right? No, South
South
Florida.
Florida, Michigan
South,
State, Miami, Furman.
okay. And this is Miami of Ohio or Miami of
Correct.
Florida?
Yeah. Yeah. Not this one.
Okay, not that one. Well, tonight our topic again is going to be on cross country running, distance running, whatever the flow of the group wants to go with that. And I guess mainly if you guys will kind of tag team, kind of start as to how you developed the culture there and what it was like before you got there. And then, of course, now you've worked it into a very dominant program.
Robert, you go.
No, you go. You go ahead.
Ladies
Okay.
first.
Um, well, I will say I think everyone takes over a program at a different point, and there's certainly the training component that goes into it, but I think there's also the culture component that goes into it. And I have found, especially especially in the last few years, whether it's high school or college or beyond, like that culture component is probably the first place I would start. Because I think surrounding yourself with like-minded, like-valued individuals lets the other things fall into place. And that sounds kind of fluffy. But I think for Robert and I, we felt like we could impact US distance running at Furman specifically because it's such a community-based sport. I mean, I remember when I was in high school and I would win a race, my teachers would be like, "Hey, Rita, great job." Like your teachers know you, your community knows you. It's not like cross country is a super sexy sport and you just love running 20 whatever miles, but that sense of feedback, that affirmation that you get is really important. And we saw that at Furman. It's a small school where professors know kids' names and the community knows each other, but we want to compete at the highest level athletically. And I felt like sometimes there's a gap at bigger Power Five schools, perhaps where you want to compete at the highest level, but that means that you're anonymous in the classroom or in your community. And we felt like Furman was a place where you could have an identity in both, and that would be a really consistent experience. So I think we're the smallest Division I school in the country. I think we've got about 2,400 students, so we are quite small. But our women are ranked 13th in the nation right now. Our men will be ranked top 20 in the nation after this next weekend. We're headed up to Nuttycombe. But consistently, we try to compete, within the top 15 of the NCAA. And I think what helps us do that is that we know who we are. Like, I don't hide the fact that we've only got 2,300 students. That speaks to some of our kids and it makes us get the right kids. And then we can kind of get all the pieces in. I don't know. I'm blabbering. Robert, what am I missing?
Well, I think for both of us, obviously I've only had one other job, and that was when I was at Ohio State, which in a lot of ways is kind of the polar opposite of a place like Furman. You just, we had a whole track team, obviously 36 varsity sports, everything's fully funded, football pays for everything. It's quite a change up to kind of come down here, but I think one of the nice things we've come to realize is when people are kind of calling to get jobs every summer, those June, July, and August, and people are looking around at other positions and stuff. I just feel like every college program has positives and negatives, about it. I think they did a wonderful job. I originally just come down as part of the search committee, not really looking for another job or anything. I was just doing it as a friend for Pete Ray was putting together a search committee, and I was on it. And I was really just sitting there coming up with a bunch of stuff of, hey, it should just be distance only. You guys should support some pro athletes. A lot of kind of things that I kind of dreamed about being at Ohio State, which I knew were probably never going to happen. I mean, it probably shouldn't happen. Ohio's one of the top 4 or 5 states, I think, overall in the country recruiting. You got kids that are just dying to go to Ohio State. It's silly to become so, uber focused on just the distance running. So when I came down, I was just shooting a lot of the dark. And then, my 4th or 5th time coming down for it, they just asked, if we could do this, would you be willing to, come down for the job? And, I remember calling Rita and being like, I think we should look at this. And she was staying home with our son for a couple of years, wanted to get back into coaching. The only reason I was the director job and she was, the women's head coach is just because of the money. And if anybody knew Rita, it's absolutely essential, or she'll spend all of our budget every week. So I'm really just the guy who organizes the money for Rita. But we separated out. But we had a great donor who had started an endowment for scholarships, and so we went from 2 scholarships to 12 scholarships overnight.
Wow.
Which I don't think happens at a lot of universities, particularly our size. We went from 1 coach to being able to afford 4 full-time coaches. So that's the other thing we try to offer. So there were some pretty big jump ups right from the beginning. I think I was talking to someone else doing an interview yesterday, and one of the great things we had, and obviously still an Ohio State grad, so I hate to use a Michigan term, but we were able to go out and get a Fab Five that very first year. We got really good recruiting classes because we had a lot of scholarship money all at once, and they could come and go together. I think one of the hard parts was looking at a program like ours, and while we're sitting here saying we're going to do A, B, and C, we're going to accomplish all this, I think, we're sitting in Foot Locker finalist homes and that kind of stuff. And so we needed, some kind of hook, and them coming together was a huge, huge hook. We had this influx of scholarship money, so we could afford to get, 5 or 6 really good athletes in a class to come together. And then I think from there, just kind of, off and running. That was 12, 13 years ago. We've kind of kept the same, support staff and assistants, which also really helps. There's certainly some drawbacks to, Furman, but what I thought were once death sentences have really proven to be, just like Rita said, just ends up being ends up kind of narrowing it down a little bit. There are some people, it wasn't really my experience. If anyone knows Russ Rogers, I would say probably that Rita and I might be about the exact opposite of Russ Rogers, coming into your home and describing cross country as running into a bush and coming out of a bush. I only care about track. But it was exciting. I think we had a lot of enthusiasm. I think it was no different when Rita was at Miami of Ohio, winning conference for the first time, in their history. No different when Ohio State, when we didn't have a ton of scholarship money. We were much more of a sprints. I mean, we still won the conference meet in track, so we didn't have a ton in the distance area, but just kind of merging some really good resources along with the kind of enthusiasm that we'd kind of learned to have to foster, and qualify for the national meet for the first time. I think anytime, and with everybody, all the other coaches on here, anytime you can do something for the first time, that's really galvanizing. I think that really catches people. And like Rita said, I think, we don't have, our whole locker room's not filled with stars by any stretch of the imagination. Some of the biggest, thrills that I think our whole program's had is that, a kid who broke 2 for the first time in his life, at our university. I mean, not everyone's on scholarship. It costs a lot of money. It's $80,000 to come here. You live on campus, for all 4 years. So some things that would have been tough for me or from some other people, I think just kind of speaks to, some others, as we've been able to kind of build. And obviously the better you get, the better, caliber of high schooler you get. But what we talk about more than anything is definitely development and trying to get kids better every year. I think that's probably the biggest motivating success, I think, for any distance runner, for that matter. I'm sure it's the same for any track athlete, but if you can show a distance runner they're investing this 2 or 3 months, but their mile time's coming down 5 seconds, I think that's when you start to really get people to buy in and take care of lifestyle away from the track and all that jazz. So
Well, so you're distance only?
Mhm.
we are,
without,
yeah. We're the 800 up. We've had a couple. We get a couple football guys. We get a couple, the occasional sprinter, but no field event, no throwers. Although, funny enough, we had a shot put champion about 4 years back. And I don't know how he did it. I mean, our conference isn't the strongest conference on earth, but I think he was ranked second or third coming out of high school. But he was just so small that he just couldn't even push a 16 or go any further or whatever. So he came to play football at Furman, but he came out and we did our best not to mess him up too much. Although we actually thought we had our first world record holder because we're so ignorant about the shot put that we sent him with the 12-pound ball to the first home meet or to the first meet. And, I think he threw 72 feet or something. So I was thinking we might have an NCAA champion on our hands, but in fact, he was throwing a pretty light ball. So yeah, we've had some sprinters on our DMR. Got a guy this year who can run 48.6. So we always put together, a mile relay. We could really use a leg on the DMR. I think we had 4 guys who broke 4 last year, but we just don't have a 400 leg, which, is kind of funny because most other schools, that's the leg they don't really worry about. They worry about the other stuff. But for us, we're the opposite. So maybe Coach Schmidt can come down and, work with some of these guys in the 400 and at least get them under 50. I think we had the fastest soccer player on the team last year and he ran 54. So that was kind of brutal. But anyway,
do the other sports, are they good about sharing, or is there not a lot of interaction?
Not really. I mean, I think it's football and spring ball and it's a break for
Yeah.
them. And track meets aren't super fun. I think the soccer team is probably where we get more of our, people than the football. And I mean, we experienced the same thing when I was coaching at Ohio State. Even some of those football guys, the first year is really I know there's tons of studs, obviously, over there. They've run fast times. They could certainly compete in our conference, but they really work on, gaining 15, 20 pounds of muscle, really, kind of bulking up or whatever. When we were at Ohio State, it even took those guys 2 or 3 weeks to at least get their legs underneath them, to kind of get them running. So we haven't really pursued it a bunch. We got a couple of teams in our conference that they score 180 points or something at the conference meet in track. We always score about 100, 110, really try to dominate the distance, but it's real tough for us to kind of bridge that next 60, 70 points we're short of. So,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, Rita, what's
Yeah.
it like being a co-coach with your husband?
Do you want the public version or no, just
Well,
joking.
whatever
Um,
you're willing to share.
First of all, hi, Marcia. I coached alongside Marcia when I was at South Florida. She was the coach at Central Florida. And actually, I will say, one of the few women coaches I can remember seeing when I was an athlete. I definitely remember making a mental note when I saw a female coach, and she did a great job at Central Florida. And so that was
Rita, you were a rock star runner and you're a rock star coach. Good to see you.
But it's funny how like you can think back to people that made an imprint in your mind, and she definitely did in mine. I will say Robert and I, of course, are married, but I had a chance to know Robert when I was the head coach at Michigan State and he was head coach at Ohio State. And honestly, I just really respected who he was as a coach. And so I think what makes this relationship work, because usually when you talk about working with your spouse, people are like, oh God, I can't imagine doing that. And some days are like that for sure. But at the base level, I know that Robert really respects the work that I do with the women and he supports me and thinks I'm good at it. And I feel the exact same way with him. When I stayed home with our son for 3 years, it was definitely fun to play Monday morning quarterback. If his team was running, I'd be like, well, you should have did this because there was no accountability on my end. I wasn't coaching. But I have to say, whether it's working alongside Robert, we also, as he said, have two full-time assistant coaches who all four of us have run programs on our own. All four of us could have a head coaching title someplace by ourselves. But I think what our staff in particular enjoys is the collaboration of ideas. It's really easy to get siloed into your own problem and just be blocked about how do I get out of this, or you only see it one way. When you have people around you that you really truly love and respect, it's easy to pull you out of those moments when you get stuck. So even when we write training grids as a program, I'll take first draft on all the women for the season. But then I send it to my assistant, I send it to Robert, I send it to his assistant. I'm like, look at this. What am I missing? Like, where am I at? And then as we do individual grids for all of our kids, it's a little bit more just Matt and I working on the women. But if I get stuck with someone who is just, I don't know, getting banged up a lot, or I just can't get him over that hump, as Coach Schmidt said, I'm thinking about 10 400s at 60, and maybe I should be thinking about four of them at 55, just someone to see the problem from a different perspective. It just rounds out, I think, our capacities as a staff. And just like really great athletes want to be surrounded by other great athletes because it pushes them forward. I want to be surrounded by other great coaches because it pushes me forward. Now, there have been some weeks where we don't talk for a little bit. But for the most part, I think we work really well together. And I think it's because it is based first on professional respect, even before we were married.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, as anyone who's coached in the NCAA or in high school or wherever, there's nothing worse than having a assistant or a head coach that's just disloyal or like trying to like cut you off at the knees. I mean, the good news is I never have to worry about Robert trying to sabotage my success. Like he wants it for me as much as I want it for myself. So
Yeah,
it really does work out well.
that is a good plus, definitely. Robert, do you want a rebuttal or are you okay with that?
Well, just to be, point of edification, we have a very inverted org chart if we were really look at it, but it's basically just the budget and the planning and the schedule stuff. That's about it. But Rita's right too, and I think it works well for our marriage too, just as far as planning goes, making sure that we don't get bogged down. Unfortunately or fortunately for a coach, I think there's always stuff you can be doing, particularly if you want to jump into the recruiting world. And I think that it kind of helps us to make sure that, raising a son, like to go on vacations, like to do things. I think it does help us to kind of to plan things out, as well. I know it looks like we're around, but we actually don't see each other all that much. It's not like we sit in a cubicle across from one another all the time. So, but it is nice to be able to experience these things. And while I love seeing the women do well, it makes our whole family do good. Men really need a strong showing on Saturday because I can't listen anymore about Rita, how the women's team is ranked and the men's not. So we sure could use a good run on Saturday to kind of get back into the game here a little bit. So
And is that up in Wisconsin?
yeah, yeah. So,
Well, we'll all be watching on that one now to see how
good.
it works out there with that. Robert, you were a world-class athlete and now you're coaching. And sometimes elite athletes have trouble becoming elite coaches. How has that transition been for you?
I think it was a little bit. I think the most common mistake I think is everybody sharing their highlight stories as opposed to their struggles. I was fortunate. I made a couple Olympic teams, a couple world championship teams, and a couple world cross country teams. But I also failed at each and all of those. In fact, in 2000, I would probably describe that as the year I should have made the Olympic team. The other two probably wasn't sitting inside there, particularly my first time. So I think sometimes elite athletes only kind of some good revisionist history. They don't have proper kind of remembrance of, mistakes that they made. I think when I share stories as in, I still tried to play intramural soccer when I was at Ohio State, and then couldn't figure out why I had IT band syndrome. I was a very, very smart student out of high school, had over 3.5, I think, all the time. And I was academically ineligible my first semester at Ohio State. So I think some of those things I think make you a little bit more, human. And like I said, kind of just sharing that this was a real struggle for me, but this is how I got better at it. These are the things that I real tough. Cross country was it was quite a eye opener to me. I didn't run cross country in high school. I just played soccer. So when I got to Ohio State, it was my first cross country race I ever had, and it was a real chore. I mean, I think we were last place in the Big Ten, or near it just about every year I was on the team. And, so I didn't never really experience that team feel as an athlete really until I started running professionally. And some of the coaches on here might remember when Adidas would race Nike, race New Balance. And that was my first taste of like being on a team and really trying to run for other people, kind of. Our Ohio State team, literally, I think 2 of the 4 years only had 5 guys on the team. We were just a big sprints and jump school. So
Mhm.
learning some of those things and trying to cut them off at the corners. I still think being challenging, being enthusiastic, having good passion for it, I think are huge things. But also realizing that there were some steps along the way before you got to achieve some of those things is real important, I think, to share with them just for perspective, men or women on the team.
Do they take it pretty well? Do they seem to listen?
Yeah, yeah. And also the truth is now they can fact check you on everything,
Right.
back in my day, if you didn't know the answer to something, then you just never knew the answer to it. But now all of a sudden, these kids want to look everything up. So it's tough. There's positives and negatives. Obviously, the collaboration and sharing, things like this, where you can kind of share training, those types of things. We were a lot more siloed, way back then.
Mhm.
But I just had incredible coaches my entire time. I mean, just how lucky I was. I make fun of Russ Rogers a lot, because he's quite a character, but he's also, a world-class 400-meter hurdler. And he taught me how to hurdle, at that kind of level, along with my high school coach, who was Willie May, who was a silver medalist
Oh,
in the 110 hurdles in Tokyo. So, I stumbled across some people that were just so instrumental. And so I often wonder, how it'd be different. But I think learning track stuff and not just running miles only. Coach Smith, Al, he alluded to it in the beginning. I think trying to have more things in your toolbox than just simply mileage is really, I think, something that we try to talk about a lot. Building a better athlete, building someone who, if at the very least, if we're going to put more miles on this person, there's not all this dysfunction going along around underneath it, when we put it on, because that's obviously when bone injuries pop up and everything else. So,
Mhm.
yeah, long answer. Sorry.
No, that's good because, like you say, the hurdling component that I've got on my list here as far as with steeplechase, but that because when we watch the international, and I guess men and women, some of the Africans country athletes that are winning, but you wonder, are they going to make it over the barrier each time because they look so out of control?
Yeah,
With it, it's kind of scary to see them go each time.
yeah.
Well, Rita, how would you describe your coaching philosophy or your training philosophy?
Similar to Robert, actually, I think that I'm more interested in building out a better athlete before I'm interested in building out a better runner. I would say our women are probably a pretty low mileage group by most metrics. We have girls that are running 40 miles a week. In fact, Carly Wilkes, who's our number one runner right now and was just ninth at Nuttycombe, definitely like an all-American run. She runs 45 miles a week, but she spends a lot of time in the pool because she was a state champion swimmer. We spend time doing strength and mobility movements. We're in the weight room 2 to 3 days a week. We're hurdle mobility, we're jump roping. We have a really dynamic warm-up routine. We have a really specific mobility and activation post-run routine. So I would say our program spends equal amounts of time being athletes as we do being runners. And I think that builds out capacities in all directions, which is really, really important for staying healthy, not just physically, but mentally too. I mean, you get burnt out just running all the time. And I think this adds a little bit, variety is the spice of life. So it adds a little bit of variety to training. But if you were to ask me, Robert's a great example, would you rather have a high school runner who well, you were good in high school, but who maybe, didn't do all 3 seasons of cross country, indoor and outdoor track, and their times are a little bit lackluster, but they were playing soccer or they were playing basketball. I'm going to choose the athlete. In fact, the very first recruit we ever got to Furman University was Allie Baholski, who still runs professionally for actually Brooks Beast. And she was the first woman out of the 5K this year for the Paris team. And has been a really great runner for them. She was a national runner-up for me here at Furman. She had barely broke 5 minutes or 11 minutes in high school, but she was a basketball player. And there's something to be said for that athleticism physically, but also mentally. I mean, when we were done with the race, Allie wasn't like, well, that was like a 1 second PR. She was like, did I win or not? And that was like the basketball player in her talking. Like, it wasn't about, hey, I got this one stat that's a little bit better. She's like, who's the winner? Who's the loser? How do we become the winner? And I like that type of mentality. So from a training perspective, I would say Robert and I and Logan and Matt, who work with us, we really try to be creative. And, Robert would be the first to call up Russ, or I'll call up my old contacts and be like, hey, where's a space that we can work on ground contact time or, dynamic, whatever it is, whatever the buzzword is. But we'll try to add in a new element every year. And I have to say, I'm really proud of our program. Even having been here for 12 years, every year the nuances look a little bit different, whether it's just a change in the warm up or a change in the ancillary work. But kids need a new stimulus, they need a new stimulus for their physical development, but they need a new stimulus for their mental development. It gets boring to do the same thing over and over again. And we're talking to a generation who watches 10-second TikToks. Like,
Right.
if you don't give them something new and juicy, like they're going to be off to the next thing. So keep it fresh. Like, hey, if you want to work on plyometrics, jump up on a box, jump with a jump rope, like just change it up a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to do it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Robert, with the attention span of of humans now being so different than even 5, 6 years ago, how do you incorporate that into your training? As to we say keep it interesting, keep it varied, and so forth. Do you find that distance runners are different than they were 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I think the shoes help a little bit. I think it'd be silly not to, admit that as far as being able to handle more work, not being so sore, from it. But I think, I think the NCAA is changing where a lot of these guys, lifestyle, a lot of their training, a lot of their discipline and their commitment, it really is that of almost a professional athlete. I mean, our kids are going to class, they're getting good grades. It's not, at Furman, you're expected to go to every single class. So, I don't think it's anything too tough, but I think they're seeing just how tough it is now to be competitive at the NCAA, to be competitive, to run professionally, to do those things. And I think they know that they don't want to give up a week or two of, because you get a silly sickness because, you're out drinking beers or something or, anything else. So it's not so much more committed, I think, but I think there's some really good discipline. And it seems like kids are looking around and seeing what other people are doing and just seeing how much more it is. I mean, I'm not sure the college level has changed that much, but boy, the high school has really changed a great deal. I can't remember the last person I recruited that plays, even two sports. Now, you're almost expected to kind of run cross, run indoor, run outdoor, I think. And that's certainly a lot different than when I was, growing up or whatever. I mean, if I have one thing to think of why I became well, two things of becoming like at least a national class runner is one, I bumped into these coaches that, I mean, I just look back and I mean, even the steeplechase was at Ohio State. He was the number one steeplechaser in the US for 10 years, Mark Krogan. Now, this was not me picking all this out. This is just where I happened to end up. That played no role in me choosing. In fact, I probably chose to go to Ohio State much more for the football game that I got to go to than, anyone that was there. But, so a lot of the coaches. But the second one was, I really was, it sounds crazy because I grew up on the North Shore of Chicago, pretty wealthy, but I kind of lived the life of, like a Kenyan athlete. I mean, I'd be outside from morning till nighttime, running around, jumping over stuff, going here, going there, just building up a core. Like I've never had a bone injury or a stress injury of any kind, in my whole life. I just think, I just built, and it's not because I'm super weight muscle man. I just think I had an incredibly developed core from so much soccer, so many different sports and everything else. So I think at the high school level, it sure seems like people are getting kind of put on a track, much sooner. We get a lot of really poor athletes who are really fast runners. We got a young man in the program now that's he was 8:55 and 4:08, which used to be absolutely phenomenal and is still really, really good. But he's having a tough time with just about everything. I mean, he can barely do an A skip or a B skip. And I mean, really, like we've showed him videos. I even tried to put some little tape on the ground, like you're learning how to waltz, maybe for the first time. And, he can't even do that. So you got to take some time, I think. And, if they've done the mileage, then making them an athlete. If you were like me in high school, and I'm already an athlete, but I got to run some amount of mileage. I think, just picking and kind of shoring up deficiencies as opposed to definitely highlighting, the proficiencies at this point. So,
Well, I think definitely what you're saying about the quality of coordination and being an athlete is definitely different now. And the fact that there's such a focus on specializing at a young age now. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way. And yet that is the way the youth programs, whether it be basketball, volleyball, it's that way. And they're almost playing, their their sport year round with that. Now we've got several high school coaches on here. Amber, what are you taking away from this? Or do you have a comment toward what kind of athlete you work with? You're on mute. Okay, 1 minute. And now is the time when we will start picking at people, calling on people here. So you get ready. There you go. Can you?
Hey,
There we go.
sorry. Mostly that for high school and where I'm at, and my co-head coach is with me on here, Steve Levine. He's a first-time cross-country coach with me. We're finding that athletes need to be, as Miss Rita was saying, that they need diversity in what they're doing. They can't do the same old. We're working on an hour time frame that we have with these kids after school, and it's really hard to get everything that they need to learn in such a short amount of time span. And they're coming off of, just the exciting day, and getting them focused is really sometimes a difficult thing, and just trying to change it up while still staying consistent. And so I'm finding a lot of fresh new ideas that I can do. And it's okay that they're not doing as many miles as we thought they need to do, as long as they're overall becoming better in their abilities to perform the skills they need with not as many reps as, a couple of years ago. They needed to do the reps, they needed to do the miles, they needed to get the talent in. And we're finding that's not as much of the case, as long as we're getting the consistency and developmental hurdles that they need to overcome to make them the better athlete. So I'm definitely picking up the skills that I can kind of try to cram in the short amount of time, and be as effective of a coach as I can in developing them all year long, not just with cross country, because it transpires into the other running of elements.
Exactly. Paul, what about the athletes you work with?
Well, yeah, I was just kind of going to echo what Amber said, and one of my fellow coaches on here too, one of them, Kevin Tohat there, and we were talking about one of the runners we coach, one of our top 5 kids, missed the last couple of weeks with an ankle injury, and we've had that happen more and more, and we don't run many courses that are like really super like rutted or roots, so I think we're seeing more than we used to, just basic lack of movement education, but then also what 20 years ago, or well, that was when I was just finishing up college, but like 10 years ago, a kid, could kind of run through a trail with some roots on it. And now you go through a trail with some roots and you come out with 5 ankle sprains that leave kids on the sideline for a week or two. So we were actually just talking about it, man, we have to just go back and do some, basic balance drills and more ankle stability work than we would have assumed we had to a couple of years ago.
And that's, if you take away nothing from tonight, then that, I think that is the key takeaway, is the preparation of the human, or of the body, versus the athlete, very definitely. Katie, at the college level, then, what are you seeing with your incoming athletes?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate the feedback. I actually do have a question for both of you. But before that, yeah, I'm in a Division II school. So we definitely get like a mix of your higher level athletes, but then also a lot of kids who really have to take time and develop, like kind of like you said, we're teaching them A skips and things for the first time. Like we're introducing things that you would think that they would know in high school already, or come in having that skill set, but they really don't. You're getting a lot of kids who lack coordination, some who have great coordination. So it's this really big mix of athletes that you're training in a lot of different ways at the same time. We do morning practice, so they're waking up first things. Their body's not awake from walking around campus all day, and so we're always having to do, like you were kind of saying, Rita, like a lot of activation exercises and things like that. And kind of to Paul's point, this year switching it up, we'll do like a lunge matrix on certain days, and then like hip range of motion exercises a different day as activation. And then we do a mini band series a different day, and we kind of like rotate it around to switch it up. So it's not the same thing every day. But this year I started adding in just like single leg hops, to start the day after doing some other things, and just to wake everything up and get a little bit of plyometric work in. And like, I've liked the result like over the course of the season so far. Just with seeing a little bit less like ankle turning, and a little more stability at the ankle, a little bit kind of working on ground contact time too. So I've liked that. But going into my question for both of you, I guess from the women's perspective with the 6K, and then the men's perspective with like the 8K, 10K, how do you, going into championship season, how do you describe and teach the race modeling for the championship events? Like, how do you describe what that like race model needs to look like for for both the 8K and the 10K, and then for the 6K for the women?
You want me to go, Robert?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I love everything that you just said, because even as you just talked about championship season, like when you have all that ancillary work in place, to me, like part of what sets up a really great championship season is a smart taper. And I know some coaches love to pull back mileage and volume. I have found that's a really nuanced thing to pull back mileage. That tends to be their home base. But what I do love to pull back is some of the ancillary work. So even if, we're doing 2 sets of 10 over her mobility, 2 weeks before we'll go to 2 sets of 8 and then just 1 set of 8. Like just getting a little bit of rest from those other modalities is smart. As it relates to how to position, what was the word that you used?
Like the race modeling.
Modeling.
Yeah, like how do you describe it to the athletes?
I mean, I don't know if I talk about the 6K as much as I talk about the process, right? Because it's a process-oriented thing. And one of our mantras this year, actually, as a program for our women, is like, we want to be the team that does simple better. Like, our sport is actually pretty simple. Start line, finish line, grass in between. And if we're the team that can do simple better, we're going to give ourselves a great opportunity. And we talk about having no brains the first mile. Like, these are no-brainer decisions. You don't have to put any emotional energy into it, but it's like, I know what time I'm getting on the start line. I know what my blowout looks like. I know what my warm-up looks like. Like, have all these no-brainer situations where save your emotional energy for the hard decisions that come after the mile. There should be no, oh gosh, I don't know what to do, or I don't know where I'm supposed to get out. Like, it should be a no brains, keep it simple, stupid type of race plan. And if it's a hill, what's that? Oh, sorry. If it's a hill, do simple better. Know how to get up a hill. Like, just nail the basics. So I would say I'm a pretty holistic coach. That comes back to like knowing what you're going to eat the night before, know what you're going to eat the morning of, like no brains decisions up until the first mile of the race. And then this gut check moment. Like, that's when you have to start making hard decisions. But even there, it can be really, really simple. So we went up to Nutty Comb a couple weeks ago, and our women's team was 6, I think. I think we were 6. We were good. We did a good job. And it's a 3-loop course. And I was like, hey, the first loop is no brains. We know we want 4 touching the top 40, and we need 7 touching the top 100. No brains, find that spot, go. Like, you don't get to assess how it feels. The second loop, like, you have to race there. And I know that seems really simple, but how many times are our athletes worried about what's going on in front of them or who's coming behind them? Like, that be here now, boots on the ground, like race here now, like win that singular battle in the second loop, like hold that position. You don't always have to be like, oh gosh, do I have to move up, or just win that spot. And on our team, we call it body bags for the last loop because we want to put as many people as we can in body bags. But we have a body bags moment over the last loop where it's like, go by one girl. Like, even if it's just one, when we come off the hill, you've got to start finishing before you think you should. So I don't know how we model the 6K, but I know how I model a race plan. And to our point about TikTok or whatever, like, I think the more complicated you make this, the less results you get with this population. They aren't trying to have 5 layers of a plan. Like, give them one plan, make it crystal clear, and then just let it rip, But we are a team that does simple better than everybody else. And that starts with how you show up to the race. Do you have your spikes? Do you have your number? Do you have, like, do the simple shit so that way you don't have to so you can do the hard shit later, And then even when we come out of the finish line, like, yeah, grab yourself a drink of water, get to the tent, like, do that simple stuff better. We know we want to start cooling down because that's going to speed up the recovery process and get us ready for the next race. So do simple better, do it better than if someone's having an emotional moment and flailing over there, do simple better than them. Like, that's, yeah, I don't know if I model the race as much as I model the mindset. And I think there's a certain mindset to how you approach racing. Then I will say, we talk about no brains for the first interval or first threshold. I'm like, I don't actually care how it feels, and you should care even less. This is a no brains moment. Let's go. And we just start with that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Robert, how about you?
Sure. And also, just to kind of go back, I think one of the nice things about some of these ancillary things you do before practice and after practice is they're not necessarily, our best hurdle mobility people aren't necessarily our number 1, number 2 runner. I think you miss out on a real opportunity to kind of bring your whole program together. And whether that's the men's and the women's program with very, very similar warm-up routines or whatever, but bringing them together before for warm-up drills, activation, that's stuff that everybody can get better at, that everybody can get, almost perfect at. And we always have something when we come back from runs. It may just be, 6 minutes of walkthroughs over hurdles, but I think physically, I think it's important to not just be out sludging around, just getting in miles. I think you miss out whether we're doing, but even if we're not doing choreographed strides of any kind, we may have 10 minutes of core and 5 minutes of hurdle mobility. So I think trying to find those times before and after is time well spent for your program in general, just to kind of bring everybody back. Good opportunity to check in. Obviously, we can meet with these kids, for the high school coaches on here in particular, we can meet with these kids, a lot. But if Coach Wood, you're saying that you have an hour to go, I do think 5 minutes in the front end and 5 minutes at the end to kind of bring things back is really, really useful. I think to talk, but also, if ankles and, that's where you can kind of make a difference like that. I know that you could expect that they could just go home and take some bands and get their ankles stronger, but 5 minutes a day for, 5 days, 10 days, will put a habit on a kid, and then they can kind of take it from there. But spending the time coaching them through it, having eyes on them, the whole team doing it together, I think those are just those are huge moments. We do everything together. We meet a lot as a college team. There's some programs that I know just meet for hard days, but we almost are there. I mean, we're there just as much when it's just an easy day. But we're going to come back, and it takes 10 minutes to do our hurdle mobility routine, but we want to stay there. We want to watch it. We want to see it. Those are things that I said in the beginning, nothing motivates like success. And even if all you're doing is seeing some kind of progression with stuff like that, I just think it really puts kids in good mindset when they're leaving. They're seeing that it's going. It's hard at the college level too. So much goes into races. We race so infrequently now. I mean, we race as much as anybody, but it still feels like it's every other weekend or every 3 weekends. It's pretty crazy. In high school, I remember you got feedback every Wednesday, every Saturday, twice a day. So there's that. As far as modeling race plan, I mean, I'm exactly like Rita. I can't remember the last race plan we tried to design particularly in cross country. I really try to stay away from times. For us to bring up a time, it would have to be a course that we've run a bunch, that we really know that obviously there's no nothing going on with, it's not raining or snowing or anything else. We stay away from times, but we do kind of try to come up with windows that we want you guys going in some kind of checkpoints. In college, I'm a big believer in places don't change that much at the 5K mark on an 8K. It might be a couple, but for this weekend, for example, we have two guys that hey, we really want to, these guys are both, they've always been kind of 25th at this race. So we want to be up in the top 40. You don't have to be right on there. Every cross country race I've ever been to in my life, the front goes out too hard. That's just life of cross country, but college and at these Wisconsin meets, these big invitationals, it's that on steroids times 10. So a good checkpoint is let's have two guys in the top 40. The rest of the 3 people, let's get into the top 100. Getting into the top 100 sounds like it'd be easy, but it's actually a pretty gosh darn good run. And the problem is 60th is 10 seconds ahead and 140th is 15 seconds behind. But it makes all the difference in the world. It's literally the difference between our team being 10th this weekend and being 20th. Those front guys are going to squeeze down 5 or 10 places, but it's that back end and these huge invitationals. So we just try to give them some kind of, checkpoints going through. And similar to Rita, when we're running the course too, the Wisconsin course is a little different, but it is effectively 3 loops, and it's positioning, it's maintaining. You got to create a race for yourself. This is something that kids have a really hard time with when they come to college. And when you're talking about moving from 5K to 8K, 10K, these guys are having phenomenal races and they're literally buried. The good old days of being able to see the front, so much easier to run when you can do that. But I've gone to World Cross myself. I've been at the N2A meet myself. And, you got a phenomenal race going, but, you're in 40th place or something like that. Nowhere near the front. You can literally look over on a loop course and see, and that's a real skill that kids need to kind of develop or whatever. And kids who aren't ever going to get up to the very front, that's something to really develop. We always say, hey, I want you to be running with someone. And if you feel people going by, one of the great things we have in our sport now are these timing systems where You can tell exactly what place you're in every thousand. I mean, it would have been a nightmare when I was in college because I loved being like, what you told me, what are you talking about? And now it's, I see coaches you watch college coaches, they just walk around and watch the whole meet basically on their phone. I mean, it scores out every 1,000 meters. It's incredible, but we have checkpoints along the way for sure. And then always kind of making sure to close. And we talk a lot about in cross country that a closing kick isn't much to do with mile PRs or anything else like that. Some of that is running for your team, the ability to change your pace. Sometimes you're kicking and all you're doing is instead of running 5-minute pace, you've dropped the hammer to run 4:48 pace for a guy, and sometimes it's just making the person next to you quit. So that getting out, that positioning, and then kind of closing at the very end, we're never too far from that kind of simple race plan.
Katie, does that answer you?
It does. Thank you.
Great. Now, Scott, you just backtracking a minute here about the drills and the lack of coordination, if you want to say it, the high school kids. You've worked with high school quite a bit, but I also know that you've got a pretty good like drill procedure that you enforce with your athletes. Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I learned I've learned basically in my whole coaching career, don't get conditioning advice from endurance coaches because they'll just give you more endurance activities to do. You've got to learn these skills that Rita talks about. And by the way, Rita, fantastic. The stuff you're saying, I appreciate it. Guys like Vern Gambetta and people like that understand making the better athlete. And yeah, I mean, things are different uh, these days as compared to when I was running in college. I was like Robert, I was out playing all the time, but still, I mean, we've got 69 boys that broke 9 minutes at Arcadia last spring in one day. And we had 4 years in the early 2000s when nobody broke 9 minutes for 2 miles. So we have better athletes this year, but we've got better athletes because some really good coaches on some really good teams are doing functional movement, functional strength work, things that are specific to the cycling of the running stride. And the stuff I picked up again, I've picked it up from sprint coaches and guys like Vern. We use we've got routines. We're doing it every day. We're moving our feet fast every single day, but we're also coordinating it with we use sticks. We use a lot of PVC sticks. I know I've talked about this on this Zoom before. There's 20 minutes a day where kids have a 5-foot PVC stick in their hands, and it's it helps correct posture. It lets me keep an eye on posture. I've got a huge team at Stillwater. I can't keep an eye on 60 boys. I've got to be glancing around a lot. And if you're coaching and doing drill work, and this is truly drill work, drills have to be heavily coached. So many distance coaches especially think, your warm up is when you do drills. That's not true. Warm up is just like playground activities to get you ready for the day. The drill work follows the warm up, and that's heavily coached. So to directly answer your question, you've got to do a lot of lunge work, deep body squats with a stick. You've got to just do a lot of dynamic motion over and over and over again, not like 4 or 5 times a season, but like 4 or 5 times a week to really change these movement patterns. Because you do want to reduce ground contact time. Rita mentioned that. I mean, it is a buzzword, but it's true. Distance runners get faster when they reduce their ground contact time. And a 10-mile run is good for the aerobic system, but it doesn't help reduce ground contact time. There has to be other things that do that.
what is the advantage or use of the sticks for people that don't know? Or the pot?
Well, stick is used in many ways. It's a 5 foot stick. It's got a rubber cap on each end. It again, these distance runners. If these distance runners were more coordinated, they wouldn't be distance runners. They'd be doing a different sport, or they'd be sprinters. So when we do things like um, just a deep body weight squat, they need to support. They'll tip over. They're not doing it right. But if you give them another point of contact, either behind them if you're against the wall, hold the stick against the wall, or on the ground, that gives them additional contact points so they can hold the exact motion that you want them to hold. It'd be nice if they didn't need that, but they're distance runners, so they do need that. And so they're used as a balance point. They're also used to keep um, uh, when you've got the stick over the head, like if you're going over hurdles, if you're doing hurdle drills, sprinters aren't, they're already good at it, but distance runners aren't. So I don't want their arms being used to balance. I want their torso to be used as balance. So I want to take their arms out of it. So if I put a stick in their hands and put the stick over the head, now the arms are out of it. They have to learn to balance using their torso. And so there's a number of ways it's used very effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen sprinters, I've seen jumpers. I think that's one of the newer, like we were saying, is to implement something new in your warm up or your practice. And I think the use for posture and to reinforce appropriate posture, that the stick use has become very integrated in.
And it's just not in track. I've seen Steph Curry. I went to the Warriors practice with Vern. Steph Curry's using a stick. Iga
Oh,
Swiatek, the #1 woman tennis player in the world. I've got a photograph of her using the same stick outside of Wimbledon um, as part of drill work, not warm up work, drill work that she does. So, I mean, we're not inventing things here. We're just using useful tools to elicit the exact rhythm and body motion and coordinative synchronization activities as you're creating engrams of there is no such thing as muscle memory. We use that term a lot, but memory is in the brain. So that's when you do things correctly, your your brain learns to do things correctly, and then your muscles will then follow.
that's a good point because I know we do use that word, but it is the brain that is learning and
Yeah,
memorizing.
that's one of those ridiculous terms in uh, coaching/science that's
Yeah,
out there.
our buzzwords. Okay, do we have any other questions, Al?
Getting back to what Robert said, I grew up in St. Louis, and it was back in the '60s. It was home of soccer in the United States, and uh, I chose the high school. I went to a military boys' high school because of soccer, and we played in the winter time. So I ran cross country just to get in shape for soccer, and I remember my freshman year winning a race and not knowing what the hell just happened, but soccer, and Robert will know this, you're sprinting down the sideline, and our team was #1, and we won 3 state championships, and we won Parade Magazine national championship 3 times in a row. And if you're running down the sideline and you got taken out from behind, Robert knows you can't lay on the ground like you're a European player. And cry. You got to get up and go, and Robert will tell you it is a physical demanding sport from side to side, forward, kicking with both legs for 30 yards and things like that. And you can't believe what it does for you in track and field to have that kind of body. I never had a bone fracture at all, either, Robert. And I think it was because of that lifetime. And even when I got into coaching, I thought that velocity was the most important thing. Whether you want to call it like Rita did, a ground contact, you have to be able to mirror the kind of things that you would like Tiffany was a triple jumper, a high jumper, and a ran distance in high school. And she was easy. I mean, that's the reason she could run 8 400s where the rest of them could only run 6, and very, very fast. And I think that doing the things properly, and the one thing that used to drive mine crazy was what Scott said. Scott and I have taught for what, 30 years together, Scott? And we believe in from being a sprint coach to being a distance coach, you got to be all of that to especially in the mile and the 2 mile and even in cross country. You think cross country, you don't run hills in cross country. You don't have to run on the side of a hill. All those things have got to be trained and have got to be somehow worked on. And sprint mechanics, like at Florida, Robert knows at Mississippi State, we ran 301 8 years in a row, with our people. And if you're doing mile repeats in cross country and you want them to run in the 420s, high 420s, which I'm sure Roberts can, and the low 430s, if it take, somebody will say, well, we're only going to give them 3 minutes rest. As Joe Vigil said, you run that fast, you've got to have equal rest. And you got to think like a sprint coach. If velocity is the most important thing in doing 5 times a mile or 12 times 800 meters and velocity is the most important, you better put recovery in there that they can run fast. And like Rita said, and if she wants her milers to run fast, why not do 5 very, very fast?
Right. Right.
And because you're going to go out the mile or the 1500 or the 8K or the 10, whatever it is, you're going to go. You'll be very anaerobic early till the oxygen uptake comes involved. Then that becomes, as Scott calls, a cruise part of your mile. And then you got to go back to the anaerobic part. I remember Robert and I being in Europe at the same time, and especially in Belgium one time. And the week before I saw those guys in the mile, they went out in 155 and ran 332, 333. The same guys the next week went out in 205, and in both races they run 340, but in both races they ran 24, 25 seconds for the last 200, but they didn't get out fast. So you got to train that. And there's everything that they're talking about, ancillary stuff, and what Scott was talking about, balance, Pilates, things like that. All of those things, I always found out, and Rita, I don't know if you think this too, but I've never met a girl that's an All-American that can't do pull-ups on her own.
Yeah, I
You
require
have
my
to be
women
able-
to be
You
able
have
to
to
do
be able to
10.
do pull-up. Yeah, you have to be able to do pull-ups on your own. You don't need help.
Can you
And
manage your
every
body weight?
All-American, yeah, every All-American I ever had at Florida State or Mississippi State, and the 3 national champions that we had, and I mean, they could do all that stuff, and they were nothing but a ball of muscle.
There you go. Well, let's keep going here because we're time and we've got hands up. Jim, what was your question?
Yes, ma'am. Robert, Rita, you talk about developing athletes. What kind of multi-plane stuff do you do? Do you, in terms of drills, exercises, do you karaoke, whatever? Just make them move in different, rather than a single plane, move them over a multiple plane.
The mobility piece is huge, and the multi-joint movements, are huge. I will tell you a great resource that I'm sure you guys have heard of it, Jay Johnson. I mean, he puts out some really great, easy, effective stuff, whether it's his strength and mobility circuits or his lunge matrix across different planes of movement. So yeah, moving the body in a couple directions, but I'm not a reinvent the wheel type of gal. Jay Johnson, he's a smart dude and he's got some good information out there.
So Jay, Rita,
Jay Johnson, and it's called SAM, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And SAM stands for strength and mobility. But I'll take my women through a phase 1 for 4 to 6 weeks so you can get a physiological change. And then again, change out that stimulus. We'll move to phase 2. And I'll go all the way through 4 phases in a season, and then I'll come back down and go back to 1. But it's a series of, as you said, multi-plane, multi-joint movements. We do it after our hard days and our long runs. To Coach Christensen's point, muscle memory, the funny term, but I do think you can find a way to re-cue the muscle firing patterns so that you can speed up recovery after a run. So I like to do Jay Johnson's routines after particularly hard sessions where their central nervous system, they might just be a little bit fried and everything is kind of short-circuiting. It just reconnects those synapses and it gets things firing in the right patterns so that you can speed up recovery, a little bit more hormone production to also help with recovery, but it sets you up for that next day to be a little bit better. I love Jay Johnson. He should get some money from me.
Thank you. I'll steal it.
Yeah, I stole it.
What do you do as a warm down? You mentioned after or a post workout.
So yeah, after our Tuesday and Saturday sessions, which are usually a threshold in a long run, I'll do the strength and mobility circuit. I do a series of on our regular days, we do the Lauren Fleischman drills. I'm sure you guys, A skip, B skip, karaoke, straight leg pulls, fast feet drills. If you YouTube Fleischman, run it like Lauren Fleischman, just because she did an amazing job demonstrating them. But we always end with drills and mobility, and all of our stuff is stolen, 100% stolen from other people. But getting into the routine of putting your body in the right posture, knowing that you're engaging your glutes to move fast and powerfully, like just reminding distance runners, to everyone's point here, how to be sprinters at the end of their run. Great way to end your run, great way to start your run, and they can be the distance runner in between. But a simple series of 5 drills where you're turning on your glutes, you're getting nice, stiff, reactive ankles, keeping your chest up, keeping your shoulders, all the cues, all that does, muscle memory or neuromuscular, whatever you want to call it, it just sets good habits. And if you can train your body to have good habits on tired legs, that's awesome.
That's yeah, very good. Katie, did you have some more questions?
Yeah, I had one more question. I know we're probably in that kind of phase of the year, but when you're planning out your seasons, how early do you start introducing like race pace work and at what volumes? And the questions for both of you, since you're, doing different events, and what does it look like? And so how early do you start introducing it in the course of a season, and what does it look like? And then when you're tapering off, towards championships, what does the volume get reduced to?
Robert, you go.
I think for us, it's really just kind of different percentages. I don't think we ever try to go too long. I think distance coaches might look up and all of a sudden realize that for 6 months, all we've been doing is jogging, from an entire summer all the way until, early fall. So I think we start, faster stuff, strides, first week of training in a block or whatever. If you're talking about, thousands mile repeats, I think even how the schedule, I mean, I just like to see a lot more ebb and flow. I think coaches make a real mistake when they just try to build, mileage, distance. And then at the last second, they say, all right, well, now we're going to start speed work. And it comes from nowhere, and muscles aren't ready, and tendons aren't ready. And there's just a great deal of, there's even some detraining. I think that kind of goes on when you're doing that. In fact, we see it in recruiting all the time. We're recruiting a kid in September and they've run some good times. And they said, I haven't even started speed work yet. Just wait till that starts, and they keep putting it off. And all of a sudden they do it, but then they somehow, they might get injured, or there's not enough time, or they're not in the good enough fitness. So, I think it is a good tapering tool, but I also, to kind of echo what some people are saying, if you're not willing to take kind of the rest on some of these things, then I think it's just overtraining and just way too fast out of the blue. If I ask the guys tomorrow to go out and all of a sudden we're going to start running some 400s and 56, and I'm only going to give them a minute's rest and just pound the heck out of an anaerobic system that's been, really just kind of held up by some, neuromuscular 150s or some good glorified strides or whatever we can get out of circuits. I just think that's a real recipe for disaster when you're going. So we try to keep fast stuff at least once a week. Right now, Rita mentioned Tuesdays and Saturdays. We also kind of throw in just kind of a good speed day on Thursdays. And by speed, I mean, we'll take at least 3 minutes rest to do some 300s and 200s. They're not super fast. Sometimes we start as slow as 3K race pace down to mile race pace. But in the middle of a cross country season, that might feel like you're doing something fast. But more importantly, we make sure that kids are taking at least 3 minutes rest between them, which might be overkill. But, I had a great coach when I was running post collegiately, and we would take 6 minutes between that kind of stuff. We'd run a little bit faster, but, it's a interesting thing when you're at a warm up, track, and some of the coaches are on here at some of these. Everyone looks at the sprinters and says, "Oh, what do you have for a workout today?" And they got 5 times 50 meters or something, and you scoff and you laugh or whatever. But when you see how fast these guys run and the explosion, and I know they take 10 minutes rest, but that's what it takes for their system to completely hit reset. So when we're doing quote unquote speed work during cross country, what we try to do is not still be affected by a previous workout and not infect the upcoming workout. So we do give a lot of rest when we're doing that kind of stuff during cross country season in particular. Rita, think of anything else?
I would just say in general, I think we like to train on the extremes a little bit. Like over here, you have the distance, heavy endurance stuff, and over here with high sprint rep work, right? So we spend a lot of time doing like marathon pace for long runs and threshold work, but we spend just as much time doing really explosive hills, barefoot 100s, 8 of them. So you're talking about 800 meters of all out sprinting. And then part of what's nice about that is they want to run race pace. I understand that. I think the less experienced runner really needs to feel race pace. But if you've trained on both sides of race pace, you run race pace on race day. Like that's the day where you actually get to run the race pace. And you can't hit that system too early and too often. So I was actually and I'm happy to email you my training for the year. I was just looking like, gosh, when did we start race pace stuff? I've done exactly one race pace session this season. One. And I'm gonna do one more. It's just because we have kind of a soft conference. So I'm rita.gary@furman.edu. If you ever wanted to see my training, I will send it to anybody. It doesn't bother me at all. But I like the nuance of it. And I actually think the closer you get to your key races at the end of the season, the more you get out of that zone at practice. Like, I don't want to compete with that. And if you can only go hard there once every 10 days, it better be on the day that we're racing.
Does that help,
Thank
Katie?
you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. You had mentioned earlier about your recovery plan. I forget who mentioned it. What is your recovery plan after workouts?
Well, the best recovery plan any athlete can have is 8 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep every night. That is literally the only time physiologically that your body will recover, rebuild, and repair. So you can put all the ice or Normatex or stretching that you want on your body. And if you don't go to bed, it means diddly squat. So emphasizing how important real rest is, I would say I would probably spend more time talking about a bedtime routine, having them shut their phone off 30 minutes before that they're going to bed, journal about their day, journal about their training, take a little melatonin, smell the incense, whatever the thing that you need to do to go to bed. But you can't substitute for great sleep. And I have to be honest, for every woman I've ever coached that has gone from pretty good to like all American status, I'm always like, okay, well, what was the one thing that was different this year? And I want them to be like, oh my God, Coach Rita, you were so inspiring. Like you said this and this. They never say that. They always are like, yeah, I added 15 minutes onto my sleep. The biggest thing that will push your athlete forward isn't what you say, isn't what you do at practice, but how they absorb that stimulus. And they can only absorb and adapt to it when their eyes are closed and they are in sleep.
That's a really good one right there. Now, the issue is getting the kids to do it or getting them to believe it. And like you said, putting up the phone.
Yeah, you could Google the benefits of sleep. And I love to go to practice and say like, hey, imagine I would give you this pill. And if you took this pill, totally legal, but I promise that you are going to have a 70% less injury rate and a potentially 50% bigger like production in your athleticism. And it's free and it's legal. Would you take the pill? And everyone's like, yes, I would take the pill. I'm like, great, start with 9 hours of sleep and I will see you tomorrow. But ask them if they would do it. If it was free, legal, would they do these things to become a better athlete? And then tell them it's sleep and that they're totally in charge of it.
Great. Katie, do you have anything else? No? Robert, quick before we close here, steeplechase. What the tidbits, I know it's not steeplechase season, but I know that hopefully people are practicing for it.
Yeah, I think there's probably no better word than velocity in from Brooks Johnson. I remember him always kind of saying that. So you had mentioned some of the other athletes with now terrific form. But if you are going fast enough into the barrier inside that quarter, a couple steps before and a couple steps after, as long as you're not doing anything super unbalanced or flipping around or falling, you're in business. So one of the things that we're already working on is I'm kind of a combination of Coach Hislop and Brooks Johnson, which probably couldn't be two more different people walking this planet. But good speed in and good balance, good jumps. I think getting the endurance from it is really, really important, just the timing of it. So right now, even with the kids in the middle of cross country season that I know are going to be steeplechasers later, they add to kind of their hurdle mobility, just doing some basic pullovers, which kind of increase, range of motion as well as power in their hip flexors, which I think is really, really important. And I think we also spent a lot of time on the 12-foot trail leg drill too. And that just more kind of syncs people up. Most of the people we get obviously haven't had any experience with hurdling, but if we can really spend whatever time we can do, and once again, you're looking for things that aren't going to infect, training and conditioning. And I think it was either Scott or Al who said, you really got to have someone watching you on stuff to start. If you can just learn how to do it correctly right away, then you can go about kind of doing all the patterns, doing the repetitive stuff. But once you develop a bad habit in something like that, it is very, very difficult to break it. I was incredibly lucky. I mentioned not only did I have a silver medalist in high school teaching me how to hurdle, but then a world-class 400-meter hurdler to kind of continue doing that, as well as the #1 steeplechaser in the country. So having those sets of eyes for 8 years were really incredible. I think we had a couple of steeplechasers at Furman last year. And one of the benefits of COVID, I have to say, is we just spent 2 months really learning how to hurdle, and we were basically like a sprint a sprint team for 2 months with a lot of these guys, and they learned how to hurdle absolutely beautifully. So I know it can be done. It's just a matter of fitting it into your program. I think the biggest mistake people make is they get through a whole cross country season, then they get through a whole indoor track season, and then they go, "Oh my God, we got the spring break trip in 3 weeks. Let's fill up the water jump and start doing some hurdling or whatever." So I just think using the entire time. Sundays is a really down day for us. We try to, a lot of kids take it off, and those that don't, we try to, even our biggest mileage people, Sundays is really a 4 to 5 mile easy day. And that's a nice day to kind of work on a skill. And once again, taking appropriate rest. And it's not rest like you think, like a distance runner, because distance runners don't want to take rest. They want to, if I'm not feeling discomfort, if I don't have booty lock, then it wasn't a day that I wasn't working hard, I wasn't trying. This is looked at as a skill, no different than trying to bend a soccer ball or do something else. It's a skill. Free throws, I've never seen anyone do free throws for time. I mean, nobody works on that. If you see the best, high jumpers in the world, they start with skill work and then move to conditioning. They don't, do the opposite. So same thing with hurdling. I just see it so rushed through by, steeplechase coaches. And it's true. If you have to pick one thing, it's better to be in shape than it is to hurdle good. But why would you want to pick both? The best in the world don't actually just do that. I know a lot of Africans that are going, but they're also guys that could run a heck of a lot faster if they could also hurdle, but they're not going to waste that time on doing it, whatever it might be. So, like I said, treating it like a skill, taking tons of rest. We used to always have to finish a gallon of water during our 45 clearances in practice. So we go there and back. You'd have 3 hurdles there, 3 hurdles back, and then you'd have to take a chug of water. We only did that 6 times, so it took us a long time to do 6 there and back. Most time it would take close to an hour, and it was an overkill, I'm sure, but I think a lot of people would say Mark Krogan is one of the best steeplechase technicians to ever do it. And he wasn't a superstar runner, so it was a big part of why he was competitive, in the rest of the world. So.
Now you mentioned a 12-foot hurdle drill. What is that?
You're just putting 12 hurdles to the side. If you want to Google Chick Hislop trail drill, but it just helps to get your trail leg flat. I think that's the hardest movement. First rhythm is to leave off your right foot, have your right trail leg. I think once you can kind of get that movement down, then you kind of lay a foundation for other things. But it does allow you to also start to sync up arms, similar to what Scott was saying about, you're not going to have a lead arm and snap it down when you're a steeplechaser, but you do want balance. You want your arms up in front, not serving certainly as a counterbalance with it being thrown backwards, which most weak people have to do, reaching for your toe or reaching for a door handle and walking through the door. It really kind of cleans that up. So you don't worry about a trail leg as much. You're barely leaving the ground, but you do get a trail leg kind of in place, and you also get an upper body in place, because an upper body is really I think it's really undercoached. I think a lot of people are all over the place. They have wild arms, and it's just basic physics that until your lead arm kind of comes back, your trail leg can't go forward. I mean, unless you are incredible. I don't think Michael Jordan could do that. So, it's just working on some of those balance things I think are really good. And you can create things where it does not affect your cross country performance or anything else. And for a lot of people, this might be their best event. I know it's sometimes people get put in it because they can't do this or they can't do that. That's the running joke. And sometimes it's true. And it was kind of true with me, but it was also my best event. It was 3 miles. I wasn't quite fast enough for the mile. And, the 5K was just long for me. And the 3K kept my interest. I was good at it. 2 miles, I broke the Big Ten record at 3,000 meters my senior year. And that's when my steeplechasing really kind of took off. So it's a good natural distance, particularly for high schoolers. In the beginning, I think Coach Katie was asking about moving up to 8K and 10K. You also have kids that are kind of without an event. I do think 2 mile moving up to 5K is tough for freshmen, even on the track or whatever. And so that steeplechase might be a nice thing for, high schoolers to look at as well as college, obviously.
There you go. That's a good point. Al, we got like 2 minutes, so it's got to be quick.
I think what Robert was saying, Chick Hislop's, he puts those 12 hurdles up, and you go down one side with a right trail leg and come up the other side with the left trail leg.
Oh, okay.
And that's the other thing. And then Colleen Quigley does, Terry Long and I did a great thing to teach bounding for that water jump.
Right.
You
That's
and I talked about that. You and I talked about that.
right.
If you can bound, those A skips teach you how to bound if you put it into bounding on the track. And realistically, what you do in a water jump is bound. That's exactly what you do. And the other thing is Mike Holloway, you notice his great hurdler, that arm doesn't move a whole lot for his trail leg. He keeps it steady.
Mhm.
And Grant is, I mean, who's the best hurdler in the world?
Right. Right.
And Mike taught that. And that's what you have to do there's a lot of people going over that water at the same time. And you can't be flailing around,
No.
even going over a barrier. And Robert's right. Plus the fact that he won the indoor 3000 in the Big Ten because you've got to run fast between those hurdles.
Oh yeah, very definitely. And I do remember that, Al, with the bounding and how that carried over. So maybe the next time when we do talk about steeple a little more, we'll definitely add that in because I think that's the place where you can add on, get that quick time or get a cut down the time, I should say. Well, Rita and Robert, thank you so much because you gave us a whole different perspective, not whole different, but a new different look for us. And we really appreciate that. And we're getting comments, or I'm getting comments in the chat about how impressed they are. So that's good. Next week we have Jeremy Fisher. So we're taking a little shift from distance running to jumping or fall preparation for field event athletes. And then the week after that, I was able to get John Hayes, the Wake Forest. So those are our next two people coming up. So if you have people that you like to hear, let me know. And that way I can, track them down and try to lock them in here sooner than later. So Rita and Robert, again, thank you so much. Good luck this weekend, and we'll definitely be watching. I'll be watching those results for you.
All right. Thanks
Thanks,
for having
guys.
us, everyone.
Good
I already
luck.
got a couple of emails. I will get to you guys this weekend, I promise. We travel tomorrow, so it'll be a little bit messy, but I'll get to you by this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Good seeing you,
Have a good
Robert.
competition this weekend.
Thanks.
Good
Good to
seeing-
see everybody.
Thank
Robert,
you.
good seeing you. We had a great time together.
Yeah.
We did. So